Welcome to Finlos Asks. I'd like to introduce you to Reggie. He and I became friends some 15 years ago as we taught at the same school, had similar interests from Star Wars to barbecue, and even started an all-teacher band together. He and I have worked on many personal projects together, from professional development initiatives to social media campaigns, but ultimately, I think we always return to a similar need for assurance that the work we are doing is valid and worthy. In this interview, we explore Reggie's ideas about friendship and family, the experience of moving to the United States from London, and coming to terms with saying goodbye. So what have you been doing to keep yourself going?
Just pretty much been hanging, just visiting my mom,
Mm-hmm.
uh you know uh hanging here at the house. Honestly,
Yeah.
I haven't really been doing too much.
How is your mom?
It's the same. I haven't been able to go and see her, um only once this week, and it's I feel bad when I don't go,
Mm-hmm.
but then I don't look forward to going. I
Right.
mean, like, I look forward to seeing her, but just, the place is depressing. Her situation is depressing. It's just, it just brings up a whole range of emotions that is just not, not pleasant.
But your mom, it's stable at this point. It's just kind of
Yeah, I think that she's pretty stable at that. I mean, you know, it doesn't seem like she's taking a turn for the worst. It's pretty much the same, and since she's on hospice, there's 1 to 2 people who see her each week,
mm-hmm.
and so I get reports on my phone, and the reports I've gotten for this week is just she's pleasant, and she's doing well, and everything looks fine for now.
That's well,
So it's
it's just
best that you can do, really, at this
yeah, I
point.
know that it was I just remember the conversations we were having over the summer when she fell a couple of times, and
Yeah,
it was all in very quick succession too, and it was very
yeah.
scary.
Yeah, it was not looking good. I honestly didn't think that she was gonna make it this far. I was quite surprised, that, but pleasantly surprised. But then again, then there's some guilt in that as well, because it's like, well, I want her to stay around for me, but she doesn't really have a very high quality of life.
Right.
So, I mean, so and I kind of get the feeling that she's ready to,
Right.
she's ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
so, and sometimes, it I've read so many stories and heard so many stories of people who just have to reassure their relative that it's okay for
Mm-hmm.
them to go,
Mm-hmm.
and that's difficult.
Yeah, of course.
But ultimately, I mean, maybe that would be the, for the best, but who am I to say, right? I don't know. It's all very complicated. The stuff that I never thought I'd ever have to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I would wish I didn't have to deal with. But
Yeah, of course.
but what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, you're managing it, and it's an amazing thing to watch, like as an outsider looking in, just when a lot of those decisions had to be made in quick succession. The way that you handled it was I was always very impressed by it,
Mm,
and
that's
it's one of
okay.
those things where there is no good answer. Like everything is sad. It's just a sad
Yeah,
situation. So like
yeah,
and you do the best that you can, and you're doing that. And some days I get it. You can't go, and that's okay.
yeah,
And sometimes you want to go, and sometimes you go. And that's you know,
yeah,
and I think you're right. I think that she knows when she's ready, and
yeah,
that's that. And it's just
yeah,
it's the waiting is hard, and I think that's always, and that's for everything, right? It's always that sense of just waiting, like
yeah,
you're just waiting for
yeah,
the other foot to drop because
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm just, and I don't know if I told you, but and we still haven't gotten around to doing this. Said, we need to put a plan in place for, because it's, in the eventuality of when my mother does pass away,
Mm-hmm.
that we have a plan of what to do, like, buy a ticket to, to go to Miami, and because, that's where she's going to be buried.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what are we going to do as far as funeral arrangements, and have all that stuff like planned out beforehand, because it's bad enough, when you're dealing with the grief, and, also having a list of people to call,
Yeah.
because I won't be doing any of the calling, said, just, and I have a Word document with the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's incomplete. And said, well, uh she'll split it up with
Mm-hmm.
to call, whether it's uh here in the country or internationally, whether they're my friends or, relatives as well.
Mm.
But, we were so ready to do this before Christmas break, and it just hasn't happened. And I'm not sure if it is going to happen, honestly, because I just, you know, I, I don't know. I
And
think
who wants to do that? That sounds like a great weekend. And it's
it
not. I mean,
just,
we laugh because what
yeah,
else are we gonna do? But yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
I was talking
Yeah.
with another friend of mine, and we were his mother is struggling with similar issues, declining health and things like that. And it puts things into perspective for us as
Hmm.
parents.
Hmm.
He has a son, and you have your kids, and we have our kids, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, so, and he's a lawyer, and he's like, so have you got your will in place, so just in case anything happens to you? And I'm like, no, I haven't done that. I mean, God, who wants
Hmm.
to do that? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's, he's like, you gotta do it. You gotta, and,
Yeah.
nobody wants to do it, but you don't want your kids to have to deal with it. That's,
Yeah.
and I know that's the hard part, and I know, yeah, it's just rough. So,
Yeah. 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 We need to actually, because, we're actually thinking about taking a trip or two this summer, if COVID allows, and, both of us are going at the same time.
mm-hmm,
So I don't think that we're going to want to take those trips before we took care of our, our will and our estate,
mm-hmm,
because, it would just be very messy,
yeah,
and we wouldn't want to, have the kids to have to deal with that. So that's something that we're planning that needs to happen in the next few months. I'll probably wait until I get out of school,
mm-hmm,
and that might be the very first thing that I do, or I might have to do it during spring break, because I'm hoping that we can go a week after I get out of school.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's something that you shouldn't wait on, if you ideally, if you can do it. And we've waited a lot longer than we probably should have
Yeah, for sure.
taken care of that.
And it's a few moments of discomfort for
Yeah.
a lot of relief and a lot of just less anxiety afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And it's funny because in preparation for this, I was trying to think of the specific point in time and place where we met, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I know it was one of those times when I think brought me down to your classroom, but I don't remember exactly what that time was.
Yeah,
I just
neither
remember it
do
being like, wow, this is a cool dude, and
I.
and I want to hang out with
Yeah,
this cool
yeah.
dude.
I don't know.
You're still at TCC. How long have you been at TCC now?
Um, this is year 8 for me.
Year
So
eight.
this is my 19th year teaching.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
then before that, you were at you were
Yeah,
in
at
at Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah, for 11 years at Lincoln.
Okay.
My main thing was, always teaching the media production stuff. So,
And with that,
but I,
you did everything. I
mhm.
mean, I remember you, and when you were in the big room, you had like a recording studio, a sound booth. You
Yeah,
had
yeah, editing.
you had the
Hmm.
editing room. You had like
Yeah,
live news. I mean, you had
yeah.
it was a pretty sweet setup.
Yeah, it was, and I was so disappointed the other day. I actually one of my students now.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird because I have students who, you know, that they're older, so they might have gone directly to community college. So she actually went to Lincoln. She was in band. She told me that, yeah, that room is being used for like band storage and stuff like
Oh,
that.
storage. That's nice.
I was really sad because, you know, you know how nice that room
That
was.
was that was
That was like the best room on campus,
It really,
right?
really was. I just remember there was such a vibe in that room. I'd walk in and all the kids are doing their work at their computers. The lights were
Yeah,
like halfway on, halfway off.
yeah.
You know,
And
there
the
was
music
some
was playing.
music was playing, something was on the screen. You're at your desk with your feet up. It was a vibe. Like it was, you know, and that's not to say you weren't
Yeah,
working because everybody was doing
yeah,
something. It was just it was
yeah.
that's what that
We had
space was for.
Yeah, we had the green screen, and
Yep.
you know, and all that stuff was, and sometimes, you know, when um you know, the equipment that was in the back, but then we would bring the equipment out, and then there were cameras that were set up, and then we'd have the still lights,
Yep.
studio lights that we'd bring out, and then, you know, the green screen, they had the video lights that were mounted to the ceiling, and it was just, you know, a really, I mean, and the space was not like that when I, you know, when I moved in, and it's, you know, that was something that I had, it took like, you know, a couple of years to get that stuff done. I
Mm-hmm.
had I had one of the teachers that I'd met, who's at like, no, it was Mr. Reed, and his students had built a stage,
Mm-hmm.
you know, before he left, because, you know, he retired like a year or two after I got there. But
Mm-hmm.
his woodshop students had built a stage, nine pieces that could be moved around with
Yeah.
carpet on it. Yeah, it was a really nice, it was a really nice space. One of my biggest regrets is that I never took a before and a before picture before,
Mm-hmm.
because when initially hired me and went into that room, it was a mess. It was
Mm-hmm.
just an absolute mess, and to get it to, you know, where it was, you know, like I said, the nicest room on campus. But now to know that it's being used for storage and band stuff, it's a little bit disappointing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and you know, just looking back, there were so many cool things that you were able to do for Spirit and for like just projects around campus. You know, you would have clubs come in there and use the screens, and you know
yeah,
the different teachers for Halloween would come and do. It was just it was a
yeah,
great way to
yeah,
just to make the
yeah.
campus feel like it was a united sort of thing.
And don't forget about our barbecue lunches, the
Of
few that we
course,
had.
how could we forget the barbecue? That was a key element. Key element.
I really enjoyed the barbecue lunches. I told you the story about the student who was like, when it was, when the barbecue was warming up, because, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you know, lunch started at 11, what, 10, and then so I would start warming up the barbecue about 9:30. So one of my students was like in class, and she was like, what's that smell?" I was like, no, nothing. You
Nothing
don't
at
have to.
all. N-
Nothing you need to be concerned about.
Nothing to smell here. Nothing to smell
Yeah,
here.
yeah. That was some good barbecue. We enjoyed that.
And
Yeah,
the media stuff that was kind of that was brought about because you started your career as a photojournalist. Is that right?
yeah. That's great. That's great.
And you did, and you studied journalism at UF.
Hmm.
Um, where were you like where were you when you were doing the photography, and how did that work out? And just kind of run. I haven't really ever had a much of a chance to talk to you about that part of your life.
Um. So, well, you know, I mean, back way back, I wanted to. I wanted to. For the longest time, I said I wanted to be a doctor, but when I got to school, and at some point I picked up photography as a hobby, and I got quite into it. Like when I was in high school, I remember I got a job, and saved up money just so I could buy my, well, actually my second camera, which was a Pentax ME Super
Mm-hmm.
in 1984-ish. And I was really into photography, and I would like take my camera different places, and I would always take pictures, and there's something I really got into. But and when I got to university, and I decided that I didn't want to be a doctor, and I didn't want to have to take chemistry. It just wasn't really something I thought I would be wanted. I really had a passion for
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to take an art photography class by a very well-known photographer who was at UF at the time, but I could never get into his class because I was only a freshman, and all of the upperclassmen would end up in his class before I could get into it. So I found that there was a photojournalism class, um, and I could get into that. So I took the class for the first time, and then I realized that that was kind of what I was doing for quite a few years. So I would just take my camera places, and I would take pictures and document what was going on. And I was like, oh, this is quite cool. I should kind of I should pursue this. So that's what I ended up doing. And and I just really enjoyed it. And I met some people and I started taking classes, and then I decided I was going to do journalism. So it's actually journalism with a specialization
Mm-hmm.
in photojournalism. So you have to learn how to write and do all the other stuff. But you know, um, but yeah, so that's what I did. So I graduated from that. I got a couple of postgraduate internships, because when I graduated from UF, there was no it was we were kind of in a recession, and there weren't very many jobs. So I kind of had to bide my time for a couple of years, and then um, I got a job working for the newspaper in Melbourne, Florida Today,
Mm-hmm.
owned by Gannett, and I was there for about 9 months, and then a job opening. And one of the stories I tell my students is you never know who you're gonna you never know who you meet who is going to help you get to where you want to go. Because I met someone who at a journalism conference in Atlanta in 1990. I think it was either 1990 or 1991, and I gave him my resume, and I stayed in touch with him. And back then was when you would put your home number, where your parents live, and your home uh, phone number, as well as your temporary numbers. And it's really good that you did, because I moved probably 7 or 8 times when I was in college. And but this gentleman, I impressed him enough that when jobs were being created, and that I was able to get a job at the Sarasota newspaper, where I worked for 4 years. And I met uh, who we ended up uh, getting married, and worked there for about 4 years. And then I decided, well, um, I would like to go to school. At some point, I saw myself teaching
Mm-hmm.
on the college level, but I wasn't quite sure, what I wanted to do. But so I went back to school, got my master's degree, and I did a little bit of PR for a few years. And then the job I happened to, I actually interviewed at Leon High School for an English position,
Mm-hmm.
and I took my resume, and the person who I interviewed with didn't think I was suited for the English job, English position. But she handed the resume to, who ended up calling me up and said, would you be interested in interviewing at Lincoln? So, and the reason why I know all of this is because when I actually showed up for the interview at Lincoln, she had the resume that I had given to the assistant professor, assistant principal at the at Leon. So, you know, and she actually she recruited me quite hard actually, because she called me a couple of times when I told her I was going to be thinking about it, and said, you know, she called me up and she said, you know, is there any questions I would, you know, I have for you? And I guess she could see the vision of what I've done, what I had done before, and how I could bring it to the classroom. And so I'm glad she did, because you know it kind of changed my direction
For sure.
as far as my career goes. And I mean, I've been doing it for almost 19 years now. So there must have been something in it. And also, my dad is a big, probably a very big reason why I am doing that, because my dad is a former educator himself, even though he kind of many times during his life he taught,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't like formally trained as an educator, but you know that was definitely in his blood. um he did that in London, and he also did that in Miami as well. And he ended up being a counselor, and actually he um had a massive stroke. Actually, on a Sunday, he
Mm-hmm.
was taking his students to on a field trip, and he had a massive stroke, and we ended up pulling him off life support a couple of days after that.
Wow.
So yeah, so he is definitely a uh, large reason why, you know, why I am doing what I am doing today. And also, yeah, I mean, and my mother as well, of course, because
Mm-hmm.
education for my parents was very, very important, and they always stressed um, the importance of it, because you know it's something that someone could never take away from you. I mean, it's, you know, it's just and I think in the context of them being who they are, and the fact that they, you know, as minorities, as a black couple, that I think that that's something that you know it, they've seen a lot of stuff, right? I
For
mean,
sure.
because so just to give you some history, my mom is from Guyana, but previously known as British Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
It gained its independence, I think, in the 50s or the 60s. It's in South America, and my dad is from Jamaica. They both moved to London in the 50s. There were about 500,000 Caribbean people who had moved to the UK in between, I think it's 45 and 1970, because there was a shortage of workers at that time, and the UK government um, allowed uh, a lot of well, anyone from the Caribbean countries that were used to be ruled by Britain
Mm-hmm.
to move to the UK. And at that time, so both of my parents moved at that time. They met and they got married, and they had three boys, and I'm the youngest of three. My eldest brothers, William, who is about 5 years older than me, and then and then the middle brother Trevor, who's about 4 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so yeah, that's a bit about.
That's a powerful through line, though, to just the talking about your father and your mother and the importance of education, and how, you know, obviously you don't go into it with this in mind. Like I'm picking up where he left off, but just to hear you talk about it is obvious that was that. Just hearing that story, I can tell it's very impactful, and it's a very enlightening aspect to you that I never knew before. And that's really, what was your father's name?
My dad's name was Charles, and his that's actually, I have two middle names,
Mm-hmm.
and Charles is one of my middle names. Uh, Charles and Peter. I was
Mm-hmm.
named after Saint Peter.
Okay.
So yeah, I have two middle names. My brothers only have one, so I have that over them.
Yeah, you're special.
That's why I keep telling them.
Do you? I
That's
mean,
why I keep.
it's obvious to anybody who knows you, Reggie. Um,
Well,
I want
well,
to go. Go ahead.
just so you know, my dad has several siblings. I think he has like seven siblings. A few, quite a few are still living. But he one of his siblings died for drowned in when they were very young in Dunn's River Falls. In fact, I don't know if you know Dunn's River, but it's
Mm-mm.
one of the falls in not too far from Montego Bay,
Mm.
uh, and and uh, and it's it's a very popular tourist destination anyway. So his name was Reginald, and my dad named me for him, his
Mm.
one of his favorite brothers who died when he was very young. So
You got a lot of
um,
legacy in your name.
yeah, I think maybe I do. It's interesting that he named me his youngest. I'm wondering why he didn't name uh, William or Trevor after, but I'm not sure if I would maybe one of his brothers would know that.
Hmm.
I can ask that question. He's got a couple of brothers who live in Toronto. So this is the thing, is that if you ever meet anyone who is has roots in the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
chances are that they have family in what I call the triangle. They have
Mm-hmm.
the family in Canada, New York, Miami,
Mm-hmm.
and the UK,
Right.
probably. So I have family in all of those different places.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when we moved to the States back in the 80s, I we actually came through Canada. So we went to, and then we went to a family reunion in New York to visit family, and then we drove down to Miami, where my grandfather, my dad's father, was living
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and then we ended up settling. My parents lived in Miami, and I stayed there for a few years until I don't have very many good memories of South Florida, so I don't go down there very often.
Can I? I mean, you mind if
And
I ask why? What's the root of the negative associations?
yeah, no, it's a fair question. So it was very traumatic for me to move from London when I did. I was 13 at the time, and I guess I was very, I wasn't. I was somewhat sheltered when I was young, but and somewhat naive. But when I came over, it was just a complete culture shock for me, and the racism that I had experienced uh, in school and from all kinds of students, because and I think part of it had to do with well, I know for a fact part of it, they had never seen someone like me who had spoken the way
Mm-hmm.
that I did, and it was so sad to me because it was like there are millions of people who look like me, who speak like me,
Mm-hmm.
right? In this, just because you have a certain color skin doesn't mean that you have so and so attributes. I mean, I play classical music, like, I mean, so there are all these judgments being made
Mm-hmm.
about someone because they look a certain way, and then they ascribe to certain things. And like, I didn't play basketball. Oh my goodness, a black person that doesn't know how to play basketball,
Right.
what is wrong with that person, right? So it just it was traumatic. I mean, I still think that I a lot of the mannerisms and the way that I deal with situations, I think, can be traced back to just the 3 years that when I went to high school, down there, and I just I mean, yeah, I'm sure that I met some people who, and I made a few friends, but honestly, I can count on one hand the number of people that I still stay in touch with from back then, as opposed to when I went to university. That was really when I kind of got my legs under me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have lots of my friends from university that still stay in touch with. Just so you know, I'm the person who stays in touch with you. Like, if you're my friend, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you're my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I will, one of my best friends, and you know some of the stories because you've read some of the stories that I have written about, like my friend Julian from who lives in New York, and
Mm-hmm.
I've known since I was 4 years old, right? I mean, we still stay in touch. Like, we're even though we, have seen each other probably 4 or 5 times in the last 10 years or 20 years, right? I mean, we're still best of friends.
Right.
I'm the kind of person, when when I come to town, I will get my friends together, and they wouldn't have seen each other since the last time I came to town, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they live in the same town. Like, I have some friends. One of them, two of them are former roommates of mine. They live in Tampa, and uh, and then another friend who used to live next door. All three of them live in the Tampa area. Well, they don't get together ever, right? But when I come to town, it's like, okay, guys, I'm gonna be here. Meet me so and so, right? And then they'll see each other, and they're like, oh yeah, how have you been doing? Oh yeah, we need to get together.
And they
Blah
live
blah
in the
blah.
same town.
Yeah. So it's, and so when when my when my dad passed away, and it's been 20 22 years, maybe
Mm-hmm.
23 years this May. It was an it's one of those experiences where everyone gets together, and I had, family coming from London and from Canada, and it's all of these relatives, people you love, and you never get to see them. And I made a vow, like, I don't know if it was during my dad's funeral or right afterwards. I was like, well, the next time we get together, it's not going to be during a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a family reunion in 2001. No, it was either 2001 or no, it was 2002, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it was 2001. And so in Orlando, and so it was my wife's family and my family, and it was called the Glen Grant family reunion. And it was, everyone from, like, Jamaica, from the UK, Canada, and yeah, we had people coming from all over. We had about, I can't even remember how many people we had, but it was a really good showing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad since then, because many of the people, I mean, that was 21 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the people who made it to the family reunion are no longer with us. So, so it was nice to be able to do that. And we've talked about possibly doing it again, but it's always, it's difficult when you have people who are just scattered so far
Sure.
um apart. So it's but I mean, that's so it's really important for me to the relationships with people. I mean, and I think that's why it was so difficult for me when I first moved over here, because when you're 13, your friends are everything.
Right.
And it was just a really difficult
Yeah, you're
adjustment.
like you were ripped away from that.
It was just completely devastating.
Mm.
And I never I those 3 years were just, honestly, they were just like almost like blur for me, because it was just so painful.
So you were 13, you said, when you moved from England. I mean, what part of the country were you born, and where did you live there?
So I was I was born in a place called Isleworth. It's in West London.
Hmm.
It's in the Hounslow borough, which is um, going out toward Heathrow Airport, which is the main airport in
Hmm.
London. So actually, when I so we lived there for a few years. We actually moved. We actually lived in Jamaica for a few years, like 2 years, when I was very very young. I don't really remember too much of that. And then we actually moved back to London, um, and into the same area. I went to school there, and then when I was so what you do is you go to primary school and then you go to secondary school. So I finished primary school, and then when we moved to secondary school, my dad had bought a house in London back in the 50s, and he kind of did it up because my dad was, he was gifted, and he knew how to do pretty much everything. He could do electrical work, he could do plumbing. Um, I mean, he fixed cars. You
Hmm.
name it, he could do everything. And so we moved to a place called Acton, which is also in West London. And I would take the bus, and both me and my brothers, we went to secondary school in a place called Brentford, which which is, just down the road actually from Brentford Football Club.
Hmm.
The team that is now in the Premier League is a very very small club, and they tied 1-1 today just with Crystal Palace. So and that's one of the ways as well that I get to kind of connect with my past. Is I've always loved football. I used to play. So yeah, so it's just this it's we live in a very small world. I remember there's a really interesting, it might be a funny story, and I don't know if I've ever told you the story before, but when I went to University of Florida, one of my good friends from university, who was a roommate with me as well. He had a lot of friends who were swimmers because he used to swim when he was in middle school, high school, and he gave it up. He was going to swim at university, but then it's just so grueling, and so he just decided he was going to concentrate on his studies. So I went to a a party, right? So they had a swim meet one day. I think it was a Saturday, and normally the swim meets will be early in the day. So we were at a party with swimmers, and the University of Florida swim team. So they were all coming in. I'm there early with my friends, and one of them comes in and he says, "Oh," he says, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from London." He said, "Oh, one of my teammates is from London. You probably know him."
The largest
And
city in the world, but you know this one guy.
six at that time there were 6.7 million people in London, and I just happened to know. I tried not to laugh in his face, but I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, no, you want to be, cordial." And I was like, "No, yeah, well, yeah, we'll see." So his teammate comes in, and not only did I know him, but he went to my school, and he was in the same year as one of my brothers,
That's
because and it was,
crazy.
yeah, and it was one of those situations where it was me and my brothers were in there, and him and I think either one or two of his brothers, and it's like we're all separated and we're in different years, but we're in the same year as a different brother, and so we sat down and talked, and and it was just, yeah, I was like, yeah, this is a story I can tell 20 years from now. It
That
was
is
just
nuts.
yeah, yeah, it was quite funny. But yeah, so I the University of Florida being away from home, and really allowed me to kind of spread my wings, kind of do my own thing. I was very somewhat sheltered when I grew up, so I was able to kind of let loose, and just kind of grow, and do what it was that I liked, and I think I grew a lot. I think that anytime it is that you can go away and live by yourself, you learn so much about yourself. So I think it's definitely something that everyone should have a chance to do. So yeah, it's my university experience was probably the best time,
Hmm.
for, and I really needed it after my 3 years of high school
You kind of took
in
control back of
South
your
Florida.
life.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't, I wasn't. Uh, I felt like I was in a safe place.
Hmm.
Whereas, I mean, your home is always a safe place, but I've got to tell you that, like I said, I'm the kind of person that I will stay in touch with you, um, you know, for decades. And if I can ever see you again, I will make it my business to do so. A friend of mine, I still stay in touch with some of my friends from London, and some of them are my Facebook friends.
Hmm.
My One of my friends just he texted me, he sent me a message on Facebook just a few days ago, and I was telling him about this, and so he was up in his attic going through some old stuff, and he found some letters from me and my other friend Julian, who went to school with him as well. Apparently, so I didn't remember this about him, but he had, when I left to move to the States, I think he had also left either that year or the next year to go to boarding school, and it was a miserable experience for him because he didn't have any friends, and the same reason it was for me when I moved over here. And but apparently I wrote him numerous letters, um because he was my friend, and Julian did the same thing, and he said he was going through those letters
Oh,
just,
wow.
what is it, 40 years ago, and he just wanted to reach out to let me know how much he appreciated those, because it was such a difficult time for
Yeah.
him. And
What an
I
archive that
I
must be,
I
though.
I don't even remember. Honestly, I don't even remember them, Paco. I really don't. But I mean, yeah. And so we reconnected then, even though we're friends on Facebook. I was like, hey, send here's my phone number. Let's, because I'm hoping to be there in May.
Mm.
Let's make sure that we can see each other. I sent him a picture of me, with two of our classmates and another person who went to our school, when I was last in London. Oh no, the time before I was last in London, 2017, so 5 years ago,
Hmm.
when I met with two people, three people, actually two people from our class, and that he probably hasn't seen in years. And they probably haven't seen themselves in years, but they saw each other when I came to town. So
You're the glue,
so
Reggie. Do you
so
do you
it's
think that not to draw too broad a conclusion, but do you think that that tendency of yours to stay connected with people and like almost to insist that those connections stay present, is that you think that's a result of that sort of traumatic experience of having been torn away from your home in London?
I think so. It probably has something to do with it, but but I do it. But I do it. It's. I mean, I don't know. I think that may be part of my DNA, though, because I do it, um, with my friends here in the States.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily. I mean, I think that there's definitely a a a need for me to stay connected, to my past. There's no doubt, in my mind, that is there. But also, I think that I don't know. There's just something in me that it's just, it's like, if you're my friend, you're always my friend. I mean, we might have seen each other in 50 years, but we'll always have something from back then, and there's no reason for us not to stay friends. I just don't see why. Um, so I don't. I mean, yeah, there might be some of that, but I just think it's just part of me. And
Hmm.
Adrian thinks this. I don't know. Maybe she's just accepted it, but I think that she might have initially thought it was kind of strange, because I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. It's kind of like, when you it's like when you teach, right? Like, what you do, and it's natural for you. So it's difficult for you to kind of, and you don't know how other people teach. They can tell you how they teach, and they
Right.
can, but it's just like, you do stuff the way that you think it needs to be done. And so I think it's kind of the same thing,
Sure.
as far as my need to stay connected to people who I have, who have been meaningful to me at some point in my life. So, um, yeah, I don't know really how to. I mean, obviously that you're going to have people who are more meaningful to you than others, and I mean, I definitely don't stay in touch with everyone. I mean, there are people who I probably will never ever stay in touch with, but
Hmm.
but if I'm calling you from 20 years ago, it probably means that at some point you've meant something to me. Yeah. So
What do you think of? You've talked about this idea of home a few times, and I know that very much in the present tense, home is where we have our families, our children, our partners, things like that. But where do you think of as your like foundational home, like the place that made you who you are, had the most impact on who you would become? Would that be? Do you think of those first 12 or 13 years in London with a small layover in Jamaica, or was it those really rough 3 years in Miami, or what do you think? Where do you think of as home when you think about
that's a really, I would chalk that up in on Facebook, like, it's complicated.
it?
It really is. I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, I mean, you might. I would probably say right now that Tallahassee is home, but honestly, a lot of me really believes that London will always be kind of my home,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's almost like Tallahassee is my here home,
Yeah.
right? Because this is where my wife is, this is where my kids are, but honestly, you know, I think that London will always be home for me,
Can
just
you can you
because,
describe
yeah.
like that feeling? So you've been back, I'm assuming, numerous times since you've lived here, but like when you get off the plane and you're in London, like what's the feeling? What is that experience?
Well, I mean, so it's almost like, and I think it's kind of like the same thing with my mother, when at one point, I took her back in 2014 because her health was starting to fail, and and we were looking for, what is going to be the best long-term solution for her. and
Hmm.
and so she said, okay, well, and I think that you remember, when, because that was my last year at Lincoln, and that was actually right after I had interviewed for the TCC job.
Hmm.
And so we went to London for, around spring break. We scheduled it around the spring break. So we left early, and 2014. And when we went over there, my mom, we ended up cutting the trip short because, it was like, for my mom, and I could tell, and I think it's kind of the same thing for me. It's like the home is, it's a time and it's a place,
Hmm.
right? So the home is, when you grew up, and it was the time when, and I think that what she was doing is she was kind of searching for, what used to be and is no longer. And that's difficult. So
It's like you're home, but you can't go back to it.
yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. And I identified it, um in her, because, I mean, I kind of feel the same way at points. So and the thing is that that's the difficult part about growing, getting older, right? The mortality of it, the fact that, well, you've had great times, and the great times are in the past, and people who you've loved are gone and are no longer around, and everything's different and it's not as good. So it's coming to grips with that sometimes is difficult.
Absolutely. And again, in preparing for this, I was thinking about some of the projects that we've been on together, and they all have a sort of common feel to them, in that we're pushing to sort of make things right. There's always that need to make things right, whether we're trying to help teachers and make teaching in the profession a safe place for students, or we're trying to spread optimism and examples of kindness. There's always just that sense of wanting to make things feel safe again, and we find it where we can, but a lot of times, especially in times of transition, it's rough. And I know that I've gotten the sense from the time that we spent together that you've had a sort of extended transitional period over the past few years between what's going on with your mom, and I can only imagine because your kids are getting older, and they've transitioned out of high school, and it's a rough time.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to come to grips with. I was thinking about this the other day. It's I think that one of the cruelest parts of life is when you become so comfortable that you kind of assume that things are gonna things will always be that way.
Right.
And you turn around and things are just much different than you remember them. And it's difficult to come to grips with, I think, after a while, because then there are things that you wish you had done or you wish you hadn't done. And how do you you know make you know make amends for the mistakes that you've made, and how do you live with the regret of doing things or not doing things that you realize that you should have done. All of that kind of piles up, and it becomes sometimes difficult to rectify within yourself. And you know I think that all of us have to deal with at least some of that on some level.
Mm,
And it's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit,
for sure.
and hoping that I can just be better. You always try and be better, to be better
To be
than
better.
just to be better. And sometimes you wish you were better. And uh and uh and and then sometimes you're not as bad as you might think you are. But it's almost like in my work, I've always been very critical. And the thing is that I'm sometimes I think students look at that, and um they don't realize that you know I I'm critical. I want you to be good, but that's because I want myself to be good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I wouldn't expect something of you that I don't expect of myself. And sometimes, though, I'll say it this way. I had a student just about a week, 2 weeks ago. We had a test, and she did really, very, really well on the test. She got one question wrong,
Mm.
and she stood in front of me and beat herself up over that one question. And and I kept telling her, I said, don't beat yourself up about this. You did very well. And then I started saying to her, you know what? it's okay to give yourself a break. I give you permission. And I was kind of making light by saying, I give you permission to give yourself a break. But I completely identified with what was happening in front of me, because, she's me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've, you're obsessing over the one thing that you have um, done incorrectly. I honestly, I wish, there were more students who were diligent like that, to want to do well. But, at some point, don't beat yourself up about, you know a point here or a point there. That's, at some point, it becomes self-destructive. I do know i do know that there is something like, of that in me, because I have beaten myself up about the lack of perfection, because I think you always want to strive to be excellent, whatever it is that you do.
I want to go back before we wrap up. There's a question that I wanted to ask you, and that was about when you were working for the newspapers. Are there any particular stories that you covered, that you wrote for, or that you were able to take photos for, that really stuck with you?
I think I might have told you this story, but I witnessed an execution
Hmm.
in Florida State Prison in 1990. I believe it was 1990. I just happened to be, so I used to work at the school newspaper. The school newspaper was the United Press International Bureau for that part of the state. So anytime it has any kind of news happened, the UPI would call, and then they would look for someone they called stringers, or freelancers, stringers at the time. So I just happened to be walking in the newsroom one day, and I believe it was John Glass um, who works up in New York at Syracuse University. I think he was like, there was no one in the newsroom. He took the call. He says, "Hey," he looked at me. He said, "Hey, someone on the line. Do you want to witness an execution tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" so,
What a question.
so
Do you want to do this?
yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I don't have anything going on." So Florida State Prison is in Stark, and so when back then when you so several people get to witness executions, whether they're journalists or whether you're law enforcement, witnesses, family of victims, that kind of thing. So I think for this one we might have had maybe a dozen people witnessing. And so the man who was going to be put to death had murdered, I think it was a gas station clerk attendant or something like that. And so what happens is you have to get there by before the crack of dawn. You have to get I had to get up at like 3 in the morning and get and drive over to Stark, which was about 45 minutes to an hour, and get there by like 4 o'clock in the morning. And they check you in. They give you a report on what the person's uh, last meal was, and you get to ask questions and stuff like that. Then they can stay the execution up to the minute right before they execute. And they put you into a room, and you sit down, and then they bring the prisoner in, and they I can't remember if they asked the question first. I think they strapped him in. And what they do is they shaved the back of the, I think it's like the back of the head, and the one of the legs. They shave it, and what they do is that's where they put the electrodes. And then what they do is they ask the prisoner, do you want to you have any last words? And he mouths something, and then they don't even really like, they don't tell you when they actually start the execution. And this was actually when they were electrocuting, and so they basically just used the body as a human fuse,
Mm-hmm.
and they just run a whole bunch of juice, and it's the amps that get you. So it's like the way they explain it, it's like a 2-minute process. So it's like up and down, and then by the time it's over, he's dead. And it was just a surreal experience, really. And sometimes I ask myself, well, why did I want to see that? Because a few years before that, when I was doing a ride along with a sheriff's deputy, and he told me, that he will probably get a chance to do that. I said, oh my goodness, I can't imagine doing that. And
Mm.
then,
And
and
then
then
there you were.
not even 2 years later, I was, and so I'm assuming it's just, I was curious, and I still kind of am, the whole, walking into a room and knowing that this is it for you. I mean, it's, and the whole capital punishment argument I find interesting. The fact that, well, you can put someone to death, but then again, if someone had killed someone that I loved, I mean, I might be okay with it. It's just, there's no black and white
Mm.
in it. And and also, I more recently I've been thinking about death quite a bit, with my mother and the situation that she was. And the thing that I think about quite often is it better for you to die quickly, or is it better for you to die slowly? And the thing is it better for you, or is it better for your family? Right? Because the thing is that I've seen both, I've seen kind of both sides of it, because, I feel like my mother is dying right in front of me, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then my dad, he left home one day and never came home. And I don't know which one's worse. I don't know which one's worse for, you know, who's left. I don't know which one's worse for who goes. I mean, who's to say?
Yeah, I think about just that question. At least there's there's a sureness, there's a certainty. Like we were talking about earlier. There's that just not knowing sometimes is worse.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, I- it's. I think it's very difficult to think about. That's that's the. I mean, it's almost the fear, right? It's like, sometimes I wonder, like, okay, I see this person. Am I ever going to see this person again? And that's there's some fear associated with that. Um, and you hate to live your life in fear, but and this is not something I even thought about. Possibly, I don't know, 30, when I was in my teens, or even maybe early 20s. I don't think I really even thought in those terms, really. But that's how I think today. I mean, it's just, shows how times change, and, your thinking changes, and your experiences affect, your outlook on everything. So, I mean, it's not something that I think consumes me, but it is something that is very much on the forefront of my mind. And I don't know. There is a certain amount of fear uh, that I have, because you just don't know.
Reggie, thank you. This was amazing, and I really appreciate that you let me talk with you and record this. And it means a lot that you're in my life, and we have our ups and downs, but it's
yeah. Well, just so you know, like when I'm texting people at 2 in the morning, there's only one person I'm texting at 2 in the morning.
And chances are I'm awake too. So.